For those of you on the computer, are you able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. It is noon. So just to give a little review from last week, last week's theme was, who are you, all about identity. So we focused the entire session on talking about how identity develops all the way from infancy into later adulthood. And so we talked about how over time, our understanding of self and who we are and what we're capable of, and the ways that others see us develops and changes over time. And it may grow from a very basic and concrete understanding to an understanding that is very sophisticated and nuanced. We discussed that the experience of adversity and stress and loss are really powerful shapers of that lens that we understand ourselves through. And that children and teens who've been through a lot of overwhelming experiences oftentimes see themselves as helpless and damaged, unlovable, unwanted, bad, things like that. And so this negative understanding of self really affects how children and teens approach new experiences. So I think the example that we discussed was a kiddo who thinks that he's not lovable might kind of refuse or push back into entering into new relationships because he might fear being rejected, or someone who believes that they're helpless might refuse to join in new activities and try new things because they're sure that they're going to fail. And then the final thing that we talked about last week was, as a foster parent, you guys play a very important role in supporting the repair and ongoing healthy development of self and identity for the children in your home and the children that you care for. And you can do this a couple different ways, by helping your kiddos to explore who they are, just what makes them special, what has influenced them, and what's important to them. You can support this by experiencing success together and having moments of positive experience and connection, learning to tolerate and manage hard times without that glossing over those hard times or making them bigger than they need to be. And then we talked about building a really cohesive story of self for kiddos that honors the past, captures their current experience in the present, and anticipates and builds towards the future. So that was last week. For any of you guys who were here last week, we discussed at the very end practicing and exploring ways to be more active in supporting kiddos explore their positive and unique self. Does anyone, before we get started on today's new theme, does anyone have anything they want to share from that? Anything that they were able to do? Anything like that? Anyone? Okay. If not, we'll move on to today's theme. So, sorry, getting my PowerPoint here. Today, we are going to talk about endings and beginnings. It is our final session of the 9, so it's fitting that we're going to talk about endings today and new beginnings. We're really going to focus on transitions and the ways that we can support positive endings for kiddos and teens. And we're also going to talk about paying attention to our own transition as we kind of just end our time together in this group. So we're going to start out with Olivia and check in on Olivia. We're going to talk a lot about her and her foster parents today, just as kind of an illustration for a lot of these concepts. But right now it says that Olivia has just turned 10. And in 3 months, she's going to be transitioning to live full-time at her aunt's home. If you guys remember, in the last couple sessions, she has been visiting more with an aunt and having more contact with her. And after a year of increasing contact, her aunt has committed to becoming Olivia's legal guardian. Olivia says she is excited and nervous, but her behaviors have gotten more challenging as the time to move to her aunt's nears. She is clingier with her foster mother, struggling with bedtime separation again, but also seems quieter and more remote at times. So, I mean, Olivia's probably experiencing feelings of being torn, wanting to leave or wanting to move in with her aunt, but also, she's been with her foster parents for several years. So just kind of remember or think about how she's been or how she's probably feeling through this situation. It says that Olivia's foster parents have mixed feelings about her upcoming transition. Her foster father feels positive about the change. He likes her aunt. Though he will miss Olivia, he believes it is a good move for her. Olivia's foster mother is surprised by how sad she is feeling. Although she always knew this was a short-term placement, she finds herself feeling angry at the aunt for no reason. She is sure she can provide a better home. She is concerned that Olivia will be hurt more than she already has been. So, do any of you guys, if you want to share, do any of you understand what Olivia's foster parents are going through, or can you relate to this in any way that they want to share? Anyone? Okay. So then moving on to Olivia's aunt, it says that Olivia's aunt is committed but anxious. Her own children are grown, and it feels like a long time since she's had a child in the home. Her relationship with Olivia's mother, her niece, was always strained. They disconnected years ago. She was surprised when child welfare approached her about Olivia, but has grown to really care about this child and believes that she can do right by her. So that's kind of how all the different parties are feeling about this transition that Olivia is about to go through. So if you guys take a second to think about a few of the major transitions in your own life, whether that's, maybe a separation from someone you cared for, or just a move to a new home or a new neighborhood, just shifting from developmental stages like getting married, leaving your own family of origin. Take a second to think about those kinds of transitions and try to remember one of those experiences. If you really had to capture the transition or an ending in a few words, what would those words be? What would those feelings be? And you guys don't share, just for your own personal reflection. And think about what influenced those types of words and feelings that you're having. It might have been the nature of the ending, the terms that the ending occurred on, the ways that you perceived the ending or the transition, the extent of loss or gain that was happening with that transition, various things. So endings are probably going to be influenced by a lot of different factors for us. And we know that all endings are not going to be the same. So it's going to vary, especially for kiddos who are in our homes as foster children and foster placements. So does anyone want to share, what are some of the places that kiddos or teens have gone after leaving your home? Anyone want to share?
We had two kiddos that went to live with their grandparents. They, when they were living with us, they were just with us for about 5 months, but they visited grandparents on the weekends, and ultimately that ended up being where they went.
Okay, yes. So grandparents, other family members, kind of like the Olivia situation, a family of origin family member. Anyone else? I know that for me, working in the crisis shelter, unfortunately, we had a couple of kiddos go on to residential care facilities, things like that. So there's going to be, thank you for sharing, by the way, there's going to be a lot of types of transitions and a lot of places that they can go, that kiddos can go after leaving your home. So just a couple of ideas here on the side: reunification with a bio family, placement with kin, transition into a pre-adoptive home, transition into just a different foster home in general, higher level care, like a group home, residential care, hospitalization. They could just be AWOL, they could be absent without leave or run away. And then kiddos sometimes just age out. So the experience of transition can be affected by where the child or teen is going, whether that's to, a relative's home, bio parents, hospital, whatever it is. And not every experience is the same. So among us, there's going to probably be a lot of different experience and feelings, even as the parent figure in this, depending on where the child is going. So a lot of different factors influence how children and teens and foster parents, kin caregivers, resource parents might experience transitions. So transitions, they have a nice little chart here that I'm going to quickly go over, but transitions can feel easier if they're expected, if there's time to plan that transition. I saw with a lot of kiddos I worked with, sometimes the transitions were very abrupt and there wasn't even really time for the child or the parent to process that transition, and it could be really traumatic. So transitions are going to be easier if you have that time for planning. If the transition feels positive, if the ending feels like a good thing, if everyone involved is supported and can safely express their emotions about the situation, if you feel good about your time together, if the time together is viewed in a positive light, and if you've had good endings in the past. Now, transitions are going to feel harder or more negative if they're unexpected, no time for planning. If some people in the situation aren't happy about the plan, if it's out of your control, if there's going to be fears about the next placement, a lack of information can make transitions very difficult. If there's negative relationships, if you've had hard feelings about the child's placement with you, or if you've had negative endings in the past. So there's going to be a lot of different factors that influence. So what do you guys think? How might the children or teens' history influence their experience transitioning from your home? Question here on the slide, if anyone wants to share or answer that. How might children's or teens' history influence their experience transitioning from your home? There's probably going to be two different types of factors here. There's probably going to be exposure factors, so things like history of loss, history of rejection, disruptions, abandonment, failed placements, things like that. And then also developmental factors, trouble managing feelings, lack of coping strategies. If a kiddo has a hard time asking people for help or seeking support, negative self-image, things like that. So those type of things relating to the lens and a child's history are really going to influence their feelings transitioning out of your home. Now, here's a little illustration here if you're on the slide. These are just a couple of visual reminders about some of the key things that we've talked about in all of our 9 sessions together. Can you guys see the PowerPoint? Sorry, I always struggle with this. But this is just a visual of some of those key concepts. So the image of the lens, reminding ourselves that children's interpretation of self and others and the world is shaped by experience. Those silhouette figures that you see right there, this represents that lens for others, the child's belief that others might hurt or reject or abandon them. This foster child label right here, and that kind of represents the child's internalization of all those negative messages and labels that they've received, and how they can kind of negatively affect their lens for self when we really rely on labels. And then the express road has been really important, representing the lens of the world and the way that the child's body is ready for danger at all times, and they kind of bypass in times of when they feel they're in danger, they kind of bypass those thinking processes and evaluating their options, and they kind of just move on to express road of action. The reflected image of the girl in the mirror, that represents the lens for self and the ways that kiddos might struggle with negative sense of self. And then finally, the broken down car and the revving car, and those represent poorly regulated emotions and act as a reminder that children might live in bodies that are constantly revving, or that have that high level of arousal, or live in bodies that are constantly crashing, freezing, shutting down. So keep those in mind as we finish today's session. But let's think about how trauma can influence the transition process for a child or teen. Kiddos might struggle with a history of multiple losses, like we said, negative lens for self, negative lens for others, fears about the future, coping with stressed and big ceilings in general, easy activation onto that express road. They might struggle with reaching out for help, and they might struggle with managing change and unpredictability. So in this group, we've talked about all the factors on this slide and how they can potentially influence a child's experience of transitions. So how do kids cope? We know that coping strategies are going to vary from child to child. So some children might show indifference, kind of a whatever attitude, I don't care. Some kiddos might have this preemptive strike of, I don't care about you, so it's fine, I don't care about you. Denial and disconnection from the fears, or sadness or worry, everything's gonna be great, like I'm fine, it's gonna be great, and just overly positive because they're in denial. Some kiddos might show return to challenging behavior or kind of demonstrate a regression. Some people might show signs of giving up. I'm never going to get what I want anyway. So just kind of, giving up in that sense. Separation fears and clinginess, kind of like in Olivia's example. If you guys remember back to the beginning, she really had issues with bedtime separation and would cry and cry. And they worked through that together with her foster parents, but now she's showing signs of that kind of reappearing. So back to that kind of regression thing. And then signs of just shutting down. So in this group, we've talked about the ways that behavior is generally functional in some way, and even really difficult behaviors, and especially difficult behaviors, can often be understood as coping strategies for children and teens. And so when children and teens know that they're getting ready to transition from a foster home, difficult behaviors may emerge, probably will emerge, it's very likely. And these might be just their attempt to cope. So even when the change is perceived as generally positive and a good thing, past experiences of abandonment and rejection and loss might trigger those self-protective strategies in the child. And each of the behaviors on this slide that we kind of talked about is really common among children and teens with histories of attachment loss when they're approaching a new relationship change. And different children are going to cope in different ways. And one child may show a lot of these behaviors at different times in the entire transition process. So it might not just be one, it might be a combination of all of them. So they just have an example of if a child with a trauma history or attachment losses they might anticipate rejection and abandonment at the start of a new relationship. So that history can really affect how they're going to cope with the transition. We have to remember that more than one person is transitioning. It's not just the foster child. Although a lot of transitions or most transition plans focus just on the child or teen in foster care and kind of their needs, as they should, don't forget that more than one person is experiencing a relationship change. Whether the change is perceived as a loss, a relief, a complicated mix of the two, everyone in the whole family is undergoing a change in their relationships. And it's important to pay attention to the reactions and responses of every member of the family system, not just a child that is transitioning themselves. Does anyone have an example of a way that you've had to support or tried to support a member of your family at the time of a child's transition from your home, whether that be a partner, other kiddos in the home, extended family? Anyone have an example of how they've supported a family member as a child transitions out of the home?
When our two kids ended up going to live with grandparents, we have a biological son who's 5, and we just saw a little bit of, him missing them. And so just taking time to talk with him about that. And then we were also able, fortunately, to plan meetings with the kids. And so we've been able to do that. And so that really helped him, but just being, open to communicate about it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to talk about now in this next session how we can really support transition. We're going to talk about a lot of different strategies for supporting a positive transition for children and teens in your care. And as we go, just feel free to share if you would like, if you have any additional things. It's going to be a lot of me talking. So starting early. It's going to be really important to start the transition process early, from the beginning even, if possible, because throughout their placement, you're going to need to anticipate that children might at some point be moving into a more permanent placement, whether that's with their bio family, elsewhere, whatever it is. And one way to really support transition is to help kiddos build and maintain connections to their larger world, especially to those relationships that you believe are going to continue beyond their placement in your own personal home. So relationships with siblings, extended family members, a spiritual or religious community, school, those all might be kind of those points of continuity for a child. And by investing in those kind of broader connections, broader systems, we can help to prevent each placement change from being a complete just rewriting of the child's world. Even if you know a child's stay with you is probably going to be short, value your contribution and let yourself build a genuine, nurturing relationship. And we've talked about before how the research is really clear that one of the strongest predictors of positive outcomes in adulthood is building positive relationships in childhood. So it's really important to make the most of your time with a kiddo, even if you know it's going to be short. And then, although we really don't want to build anxiety by constantly talking about transition, we also don't want to build that false hope or an illusion that doesn't match reality. And so acknowledging in a really age-appropriate way that your home is not going to be forever is something that you can build into conversation over time. Have any of you guys done specific things discussing with kiddos in your home? You know that their stay might not be temporary, probably isn't going to be temporary. Is there any specific strategies that you guys use or conversations that you have? If not, that is okay. It's a hard conversation to have, especially when you're worried about traumatizing the child, things like that. I feel like it's a delicate balance. So moving on to helping the child or teen prepare. So knowing what to expect at an age-appropriate level again, and with the kind of the amount or depth of information desired by the child can really greatly reduce those fears and decrease that hyperarousal that we've talked about. So as long as the child who has experienced trauma doesn't know what to expect, their arousal and vigilance towards danger are probably going to stay high, leading to that rapid entry onto the express road. So often we stay away from those conversations about upcoming changes because we worry about the kiddo's ability to handle the information. We question how they're going to receive it. But it's important to pay attention to your own fears. So, whether that be just pure concern that the child is going to become upset or act out. And we also need to pay attention to our own emotional responses. So our fears and our emotional responses. And so being aware of what you're afraid of and having a plan in place for yourself using that toolbox that we've discussed, do that, but also don't let that prevent you from having conversations that a child in your care might really, really need to have and might benefit from. So one way to support providing the right amount of information, so kind of enough information without being overwhelming for a child, is to just invite questions, asking the child or teen what they might be wondering, answer what you can, and kind of try to learn the answers that you don't know yet. So that can be a good rule of thumb for making sure that you're not oversharing, but also not undersharing, is just inviting questions. If a child or teen says that they don't have any questions, keep in mind that that might be one of those self-protective strategies, kind of that, I don't care, it's fine type of thing. And just try to provide basic information and make sure the child knows who they can bring questions to. And that's always an open door for that. And then pay attention to what you need to know yourself. So just things like, are you going to be allowed to have contact with the child after the move? Just logistic things like that. Still with helping the child or teen to prepare. Also, when thinking about what type of information is going to be important for the child, consider those W's, the who, where, what, when, and how. So who's going to be at the new home? Am I going to be able to talk to you after I move? Are there animals there? Where is the home? Where am I going to sleep? Am I still going to see my teachers or my friends? What? So what can I take with me? What does the new place look like, whether that's a home or school? When is this happening? When's the timing? What's the timeline? And how? Can I visit first? How long am I going to stay there? Who's going to go with me? How can I get there? How will I pack my stuff? Just all those questions that they might have. So who, where, what, when, and how. And particularly for young children, really concrete information. So pictures, maps, things like that might be really important to support them in understanding and preparing for the change. So be concrete when possible. Another way to support positive transitions is to reflect on your time together. So does anyone have any examples of ways that you've shared memories and experiences of time together with a child or teen, and kind of what rituals you might have during transitions? I know I have a friend who recently had a teenage girl transition out of their home, and she has been just doing like a type of goodbye book. They're really, really good about just capturing a ton of photos, even on a daily basis, with the foster child and their bio son. And so she's creating this huge goodbye book of letters that she wrote to the teenage girl throughout her placement with them, and is kind of doing a scrapbook. So that's just one example. You guys might do some different things. But reflecting on your time together, although the relationship that you've had with a child or teen in your home may have been temporary, it's still a really meaningful piece of both their history and your own. So for most children, their history is kind of held by their caregivers, whether that's in stories or memories that are shared, pictures, things like that. So that history is going to be held by their caregivers until they're old enough to hold it for themselves and remember those stories and memories for themselves. So for children in foster care, this history is, we've talked about before, it's often lost. They might experience years of their lives where there's no pictures, no captured memories, no stories, mementos to kind of take forward with them as they grow older. So you can counter this by being very conscious of capturing this history and sending it forward with the child. It's kind of that concept that we talked about last session of really being diligent to capture the present moment while honoring the past and preparing for the future. So during your final days together, reviewing the history, even if it's very short, of the child being in your home, whether that's looking at photo albums, creating a scrapbook, kind of like my example, putting important items into a keepsake box. All of these reviewing history activities can be a really powerful way to reflect with a child or teen on the time that they spent in your home. Now, unfortunately, in my example, that transition was kind of an unexpected, quick one. And so it's been a lot more difficult because there wasn't time to prepare. So this scrapbook that my friend here is creating, they didn't really get to go over it together. It's going to have to be sent to the foster child. But in a perfect world, she would have had time to prepare for that transition and really go over those memories with that child. So if you're able to, I definitely encourage you to prepare in that way. And then just communicating to the child or teen how they've affected you and your family. For children who have had those multiple relationship changes and losses in transitions, it's really meaningful to be told that they matter. A couple things to keep in mind there. And then talk about staying connected. So I know that we had, I think it was you, Tara, you said that you've been able to visit some kiddos that have left your home, you've been able to keep in contact. But for the rest of you, do any of you want to share kind of your experience with continued communication after a child has transitioned out of your home? Anyone have any differing experiences? No? No? Okay, so it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same for everyone. That's kind of the overarching theme of today. It's going to be different. But a very common question for children in care and for those who are caring for them is what the rules are going to be about further communication with you and your family. And there's going to be, again, just a lot of those different factors that is going to influence what happens next. Your own personal boundaries, legal constraints, who the child is being placed with, the nature of the relationship, the child's age, length of stay with you, all sorts of things are going to affect those communication outcomes. And there's no one right answer to the question, what's going to happen next. There's not a correct answer for that, but it's going to be important to be upfront and discuss what the child can expect after they leave your home. And it might be really helpful to pull in other people from your support system to help communicate about, what's going to happen next. So whether that's going to be a therapist, a caseworker, whoever, just using that support system so it can be done in a way that feels really supportive and not shaming and rejecting, just from you as an individual or you and your family as a unit. So paying it forward, unless a kiddo has been in your home for a really, really short time, you're likely to have learned some important information about them. So just basic information, favorite colors, preferences, hobbies, basic information, and then information about what helps them navigate their world. So what helps them calm down, what they look like when they need help, what works well for them in the school environment, bedtime routines, stuff like that. And so capturing this information in some way and communicating it to key people who are going to continue to be involved in the child's life, is really important. If the child is old enough and kind of willing to talk with them about what's important for other people to know. What do they want to make sure doesn't get lost? Whether that's a recipe that you guys cook together at your house or the rules for a game that you guys would play together, just little things like that. Think about ways to send these things with a child. And if a child or teen has become really attached to a specific object in your home, consider either allowing them to take it with them or creating some memento or replica of the object. So back to Olivia. We're going to read a lot of things that are happening with Olivia right now. So the time is drawing closer for Olivia to transition to her aunt's home, and her foster parents have been helping her sort through her belongings. Together, they have gone through her keepsake box and created a scrapbook of her favorite artwork from the past 3 years. Olivia picked 3 pictures to leave behind, and she and her foster mother framed them together. Although Olivia has had a fair amount of time to get to know her aunt, questions keep coming up. Her foster parents gave her a shoebox that serves as a question box, along with a pad of paper. Every time she thinks of a new question, she writes it down. During their evening chat time, they go through her questions. For any question her foster parents can't answer, they make a plan with her to find out. Olivia has been worrying about how to pack. She has strong memories of her clothes and toys being packed in garbage bags and a teddy bear being left behind when she was small. So her original transition to this home. The week before she moves into her aunt's home, Olivia's foster father takes her to a department store and lets her pick out 2 large purple duffel bags and 1 smaller one to carry her special dolls and animals. At home, they make a list of important things she wants to be sure not to leave behind. And finally, in the weeks before the transition, Olivia, her foster parents, and her aunt have gotten together to talk about many different things. Olivia's favorite meals, where her friends live and their phone numbers, her bedtime routine, etc. Although her aunt already knew a lot of these things, Olivia feels better hearing them repeated and watching her aunt write them down. One thing they have been talking about is whether Olivia can still speak to her foster parents. Her aunt has said Olivia can call whenever she wants. Her foster parents plan to speak to her once a week in the beginning. So you can see just kind of as Olivia's foster family prepares to transition Olivia out of the home, how they're really supporting her transition. The scrapbook, the question box, the special duffel bags, the meeting with her aunt to go through things in person, things like that. So it says that the day has come and Olivia's bags are packed. Her aunt arrives to take her to her new home. Just kind of think about for a second how it feels on that day that the child is actually transitioning. How does it feel as a foster parent? Your past experiences. You know, it's probably going to be a mix a lot of times. There's going to be a sadness and a happiness there. Think about what you'd want to do on a day of transition, things like that. So wrapping up this specific session, we talked about not all endings are the same. Transitions can be particularly challenging for children and teens in foster care and who have had those trauma histories. You can support a positive transition by starting early, helping the child or teen prepare, reflecting on your time together, talking about ongoing connection, and paying it forward. And again, this isn't going to be perfect every time. Transitions aren't always going to be smooth. They aren't always going to allow a lot of time for planning and meaningful connection and conversation. So it's just kind of a blueprint. And then just moving on to our own goodbye as a group, which sounds very dramatic. But as we close this group, it's likely that all of you guys began these sessions with your own areas of expertise. And so I just hope that this training has kind of added to those areas, even if it's just a little bit. And I would just ask that you pay attention to what you've learned, naming it for yourself. And, you know, because we know that the more that we make our skills and choices conscious, the less likely we are to get on that express road. And we know that every child and teen who comes into your home is going to have something to teach you. So bringing your curiosity to every new relationship so you can keep growing your toolbox over time. So one last time, Olivia, again, I told you we're going to have a lot of her today. So in this group, we've talked about Olivia since the first day, and we've learned from her and from her foster parents, just like you guys learned from the kiddos that you care for, and from others who have been there in your shoes and your experience. So one of the things we often wonder when kiddos leave us is what happens next? What does the future hold for them? What's happened to them? So they've provided a little final update for you guys on Olivia. Olivia is now 17 and will graduate from high school next month. She and her aunt have formed a strong, loving relationship over the years. Recently, Olivia has cautiously reconnected with her mother, who is newly clean and sober and living in her community. Olivia has kept in touch with her last foster parents over the years, although the communications have been less frequent. Olivia's aunt has kept her in dance classes throughout high school, since Olivia still loves the arts and performing. Olivia was recently accepted to the state university, and next year she will live at home, attend school part-time, and continue her job teaching young children at her studio. Olivia's story did not begin, says here, Olivia's story did not begin when she was placed in foster care, and it did not end when she left it, but her time there influenced the path that she took. Never underestimate the role that you play with all the Olivias out there. So that's kind of what happened with Olivia, from childhood now to a young woman. We're going to skip this little practice. But so that's the end of our last session. I just want to thank you guys for obviously all that you do. And thank you for remaining patient with me these last several weeks as we've kind of learned some of these things together. I've enjoyed getting to facilitate with you guys and getting to know you guys. And I hope that you've learned just a little bit, if anything. And I wish you guys all luck as you continue this foster journey. And just please make sure that you fill out those evaluations that were emailed to you so you can get credit. And let me make sure I have everyone here just so you guys get credit. I have Annette, Corey, Cynthia, Kelsey, Ryan, and Tara. If I missed your name, please either tell me in the chat or tell me aloud here over the phone so I can make sure I've counted you. But otherwise, you guys are good to go. Thank you so much. 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 Go. Thank you so much.